Okay, Braden. I'm so proud. A couple. Okay. How many of you just absolutely hate conflict? Okay. And then how many of you feel like you can do it if you have to? Okay. So, how do you guys think JP handled conflict in college? Do you think he probably did really well with that?
Jonathan Pokluda. Think about that personality. No.
He
No.
did. He didn't. He didn't. So he
By his
opens
own
up.
admission. Yeah.
Yeah, he opens up with a story, and so he said that when he and his wife first met, he kept talking about like his best friends from high school. Everybody was best friend.
It was like his best friend Jonathan, his best friend Jacob, his best friend Joseph. I'm just gonna keep going with
Yeah.
the J's.
The
Yeah.
J, you're
Yeah.
killing it.
But she's like, how many best friends did you have? And he said, upon further reflection, I was always turning over best friends. And he said it was not because of them, it was a me problem. Right.
So it was just a revolving door of people
Yeah.
coming in and coming out, right? And so a big part of that was because he did not handle conflict well at all. And so, when you don't do that, it burns bridges, right? Because somebody leaves hurt or you didn't fully discuss or come to a conclusion. And so tonight we're going to dive into the word and we're going to learn how God says we should handle conflict because that's part of living. And we talked about community last week. That's part of living in community, right? You're going to have disagreements, but to know how to handle them in a God honoring way is a whole different part of it because really the way that you handle your conflict might be one of the greatest things that speaks to you being a child of God.
Yeah.
Because it's so different than the way that the world would handle that.
Yeah. If you can handle it well, the vast majority of people don't necessarily know how to do that. Right. So that's an automatic separator.
Yeah.
So he opens a story with, or opens this chapter with a story about his anger issues in relationships and when he was younger. So he said he spent one summer working at a car wash. It was like an hour and a half away from where he lived, but he had a buddy that lived there. So his buddy was like, "Hey, just come live with me. We got an extra bedroom, whatever. You pay me a little rent." And so JP was like, "That's great." So they were one weekend. I think they didn't have anything to do. And you might ever been to Schlitterbahn? Anybody ever? No. Yeah, we got a few. Okay, is it the greatest water park in the whole world? Okay.
That's
So yeah, he's like, if you're not from Texas, you probably don't know. It's the greatest water park in the world. So they went there. Some friends went there, or they were talking about going, and the guy he was living with was like, "I don't have any money, and I can't go." And JP was like, "I got you," because he said I was rolling in the dough at the car wash at this point. I don't know what he was doing at the car wash to be rolling, but apparently he was killing it. He said. So they went to the water park. They had a great day. A handful of them went together and whatever. So everything was rocking along smooth. And then toward the end of the day, he saw his friend go into the gift shop and come out with a puka shell necklace, a brand new one. Yeah, I was like, I don't know. But he said, and he said, I just got furious. It just saw red, right? And he said, we were about to leave. So we went out to the parking lot and he said, I just went off on him. And the guy's like, what's your problem, man? He said, you told me you didn't have any money. And you go in and buy that, whatever. I bought your ticket. So this whole thing, right? They're shoving match, pushing, shoving. And so he loses the friend, right? The guy told him to get your stuff. When they got back to the house, like, get your stuff, get out of here. So he lost his friend. And see, he saw this kind of pattern over and over because he had this anger issue that he didn't understand how to deal with conflict. And he talks about conflict is an inevitable part of life. Would everybody agree with that? At some point, you're going to experience some conflict with somebody, pretty much everybody that you're in a long-term type of relationship with, whether it's a friendship or family or a relationship, your romantic relationship, whatever it is, you're going to experience conflict of some way. And he said that that specific guy, he said they were super, super close at the time. He said that's been nearly half a lifetime ago. And they occasionally will see each other. He says never been the same since, right? Some things are just really hard to recover from.
So if I got shoved for buying a little shell necklace and got chewed out, it could be, and I had let this person stay with me, it could be hard for me to be like, oh, yeah, let's go party. But anyway, that would be tough. It would be tough. But some of us have grown up in households that were very conflict driven, and the way that they handle that conflict, you told yourself, I will never do that, right? I will never handle that with my kids the same way. I will never handle that with my spouse the same way. And some of us have grown up where it maybe there was zero conflict because maybe one person ruled the whole thing, and some of us grew up with people that both were equally participating and they talked and you learned how to handle that. So whatever background you're coming from, it does kind of put a different slant on how you view, like, what if just the word conflict makes you kind of, fester up and get anxious or
Yeah, it's
whatnot.
like a relationship, right? We all bring some kind of baggage, and it's because of what our past was, good or bad. We all bring that experience with us, right?
But that past is now about to get pushed aside, and you're going to have God's word come in very directly and say, this is how a child of mine is to handle conflict. And so now you're going to have a whole new perspective, possibly, to say, this is what I'm going to build my life going forward today on, right? And that eventually happened to JP. And now his church, they literally have missions and other people from other countries, like dignitaries, whatnot, come to his church to learn how to resolve conflict.
Conflict
Like
resolution.
it's such the, like he said, that's the number one thing we do is help resolve conflict amongst our church members. And that's pretty amazing to go from, shoving somebody and chewing them out and cursing them out in a parking lot for a shell necklace that they've been letting you stay, to be able to lead a church and they're known for being able to live in harmony and to handle it when things arise the right way. That's pretty awesome. So we're going to get,
Yeah.
the gold nuggets from that.
Yeah. So an ability to resolve conflict is one of life's great assets, right? Because we've talked about you're always going to have some type of conflict. He says, since life is so heavily focused and built around relationships, and we've talked about that through this study and every study we've ever done, right? Nobody truly needs to do life alone. Relationships always involve conflict. How you resolve those conflicts will have a huge impact on how happy you are in life, right? Y'all agree with that? I mean, when you're constantly in conflict, are you generally going to be less happy or more happy? Right, less happy if you're constantly in conflict with other people. But if you can resolve that in a healthy way, then you're more likely to be joyful and be happy. So he says the number one predictor of success in marriage, in fact, is how well the two of you can resolve conflict. An inability to resolve conflict can cost you friends, jobs, and keep you from having peace. It is a big deal. And he says we feel our anger many times. We feel we're wronged, right? That our anger is justified. And a lot of times it is. Maybe it is. He's going to get to some strategies to kind of combat that. He says we feel like if it's not our fault, then it's okay for us to be angry. But Jesus said in Matthew 5:21 and 22, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother, not everyone who punches his brother in anger, right? Everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the fire of hell. So JP says, did he just compare anger to murder? And yes, he did, right? It's the heart posture that Jesus is concerned with. Clearly, we're not supposed to act out in anger. That's pretty clear and understandable. But it's our heart posture. He says the heart matters and not just your actions. He's not saying you're supposed to be emotionless. He's talking about the problem of unresolved anger. So he goes on the next couple of verses, verses 23 and 24. So if you're offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. So just step back and think about that. Jesus says if you are presenting and offering a sacrifice to God, but there's something in your heart that's in the way, you got to go get that out of the way, right? If there's somebody that you're in conflict with, that is a more pressing need to be resolved than to offer your sacrifice to God in that moment. It's more important to resolve the conflict. And that's a big thing. Do we have that mindset, y'all? It's not an easy mindset to have, right? Because I think part of that is conflict is so prevalent, right? We understand that it's everywhere, and we're always, can be in some type of conflict, whether big or small, with different types of people in different settings, whether it's work or school or job or team or whatever it is, that we just kind of accept it and move on, right? We're not so concerned about going to that other person and owning our part of it. We're just figuring out how we can get past it, how we can use some therapy to get me over it, right? But that's not the biblical model. He says, most of us have not taken Jesus serious here. Imagine how different our lives would be if we did.
So we're going to go into what does it really mean to avoid conflict? Like you can't control what other people do, right? We say that to our kids all the time. Who can you control? Yourself, right? So there's no way to avoid to have that, and but what can we do? So conflict will happen. We know that. And if you never disagree at all, like if you're married and you never disagree, do you really know each other deeply? Like if you are the more deeply you know someone, generally there's going to be something that comes up because of the time that's being spent with that person that irritates you. And so a lot of times it's a us problem. We have to get over ourselves and realize at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. This boils down in comparison to what we need to be focusing on, right? And then we table that and we go. But the fact is that if you hate conflict so much that you're not willing to have a hard conversation and be honest, then can they ever really know you?
Then that's a problem.
That's
that's
the
a barrier. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an intimacy that's developed through that vulnerability and that trust that if he says something to me, like the other day we were in Florida and I was needing to send out a text, and my texts generally are like they have to be very thought out because I need somebody to know exactly, what I'm doing. And it can't be like, hey, what are you doing? You going to get a burger? Like, I don't get any of those fun texts. It's always like very, I've got to like create this thing. So I'm focusing. And so Bob said something and I said, yeah, that'll be fine. And he was like, what did you say? We don't even remember what it was, but it was the way he received it. He kind of was like, well, I mean, you don't have to be snappy or something. And he didn't say snappy, but he just said like upset or whatever. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. In my mind, that never even crossed my path. Like I was just in the middle of doing this and I thought like it was like, yes, that sounds great. Like that's in my mind how I heard it. But he was like, yeah, that sounds fine. That's how he heard it. And so it wasn't good. But we were talking and I had to stop because I knew that my intent was not to be snappy. And I really didn't think that I was snappy because in my head I heard, yes, that's great. But that's not what I said, apparently. So I agree. And I trust him enough to believe that it came across the wrong way, different than I wanted. And so he said, it generally happens. I said, Bob, I'm sorry. And I'll have the harder time saying I'm sorry. He's really great at it. He's a great encourager to do that. I have a hard time. I'm like, I'm sorry. I have to work my way into being sorry. Because I'm like, I didn't mean to, but at the end of the day, I had to tell myself, but I care about him. I care about how I come across to him. I care about if he feels that I value him. And even though I didn't mean it that way, there's something I'm doing that's giving that vibe off, and I've got to change that vibe. So I said, Bob, I really am sorry. Like I meant that nothing at all, but it came out and I'm sorry about that. And he was like, it's fine. And I was like, well, and he said, it generally happens when you're on the phone because I'm texting, I'm in that get it done zone. Anybody else that way? Anybody else that tunnel vision? And so I said, well, you know what? I'm going to put my phone down when you ask me a question. I'm going to stop texting. And then he was like, that would be great. And I said, okay.
And
But
I also said, I'm going to try not to interrupt you unless it's something that I really need,
yeah,
answer to, like, and not,
yeah, which
if
was
you're in the
great.
middle of that.
So
Yeah.
that's like us working that out, right? Like, what can I do to show that I care? Because he's my partner. Like, I want to respect him, and I want him to know that I value. And I don't want to be snapping. And if I can't even tell I'm snapping, that's a problem. So I'm gonna have to go a step further because I couldn't tell that I was. So what can I do to stop that, right? And that was I can put my phone down, and then he hears. Great. And I'm going to try not to. So I hear that like he's supportive of that and we're supportive. That's a good conflict resolution, right? Because it could be that I just snap back and said, I did not snap at you, but I'm snapping at you now. And then, but that's not good. That's not something that I want to do. And I used to, when I was younger, less wise, I could really be sarcastically funny and I could make jabs at people, but I also would jab at myself because I like to laugh. But some people can't handle that well. Like they didn't take that well. Even if I thought if I made fun of myself more than I made fun of them, it was fine, but it was not okay. So I learned to not do that. But I don't know if anybody else has struggled with that, but it is something that you learn. But you also learn not to, if I got into an argument with someone, I could figure out how to cut them off at the knees pretty quickly. That was not a good thing, but some of us are good with our words and we can do those things. Does anybody, y'all know what I'm talking about? But you can't take those words back. And even if I was wrong, I didn't want to admit I was wrong. And so, like, that's not good. So I had to learn not to do that. And when Bob and I started, talking and whatnot, and I thought, I'm going to make a commitment in my life to him, like in my mind, to not do stuff like that because that's not good. Little jabs are not good. They don't build trust. They don't build security. You know what I'm saying? They can make you giggle for a minute, but they don't feel good. Anybody ever had little jabs gone at you? They don't feel good. And me being frustrated wasn't an excuse to jab somebody else. Like our anger was justified, right? Like you said something, so I'm about to take you out. Like that's not good. So to learn to be humble and to be prayed up and to look at it and to in that conflict say, what is the best way to make peace in this? What can I take ownership of? And how can I do? And so that was just like a recent example of ours. But hopefully that tracked. I'm not sure if it did, but hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think to further some of the points that we were making about what you bring into a relationship or whatever, that some of that was, I mean, I don't know that I would say a learned behavior, but her dad was extremely good with words and extremely quick-witted, but he could be extremely sharp or too sharp or whatever. So she saw a lot of that modeled growing up. And so that was, it kind of was natural to her. So she had to get to the point where she decided that was too much and not healthy to back it up, right? You do, at some point, you have to get past your baggage. You have to own yourself, right? Because that's all you can do. Who can you control? Yourself.
Right.
So,
Agreed.
all right. So he says, when people say they avoid conflict, what they really mean is they avoid conflict resolution. Y'all agree with that? Right? I mean, we've all kind of generally agreed that conflict is everywhere. So nobody can just avoid conflict. If you're avoiding conflict, you're probably just rolling over and playing dead when you feel like somebody's disagreeing with you or whatever, right? And that's not healthy either. So he says the next part is how to fight fair. And so he developed a wonderful acronym for this, and it's how not to be a weenie. WENI is the acronym. So it's the 4 unhealthy behaviors that you need to stay away from when you're in a disagreement. So the first one is withdrawal. So when a conflict arises, you withdraw instead of dealing with the issue. You just back off. Now, that said, sometimes we need to take a few minutes and withdraw ourselves from the conflict because we're not, if we respond in that moment, there's no way what's going to come out of our mouth is going to be healthy, right? And that's person to person. That just depends, right? How you're built and how you're wired. But some of us just need to go and take. I learned this from my my 9th grade health teacher, who was a football coach, like one of the strongest dudes. I mean, his forearms were this big, like one of the strongest dudes I've ever seen. And his rule was, if you got in trouble in class, he would not paddle you until the next day, because he literally could hurt somebody, like really, really hurt somebody. And so that was part of his thing. He's like, I'm not going to paddle anybody out of anger because I'm literally could send somebody to the hospital. So, early on, I got that message anyway. But sometimes you do have to take a step back, but that doesn't mean that you don't go back at some point and have a healthy discussion about it, right? So withdrawal is not healthy. The second one is escalation, right? So this is part of that stepping back. If you know that what you're going to say next is going to make it worse, then take a step back for a few minutes, right?
This is me learning to not say the jab comment, not do the comment that would cut the argument off at the knees and I would win at any cost, right? Like that's no part of that is God honoring. No part of that was something that was a good thing. And the Bible talks about like God will fight for the humble, but he opposes the proud. And that is scary. So for those of you that have a hard time, being like, "Oh, I'm sorry," whatever, this is huge. You do not want God to fight you. I mean, I don't think any of us want to fight God, right? So if nothing else can't stop that mouth, I pray that he puts that truth in your heart, in your mind tonight. And when you get ready and you take that breath, the Spirit goes, do you want to oppose God, or do you want God to fight for you? Then you're going to have to be humble. And you remember that, and that you have the self-control and the faith in God to trust his word, and to say, I'm going with that. God, you're right. I'm with you, because we all can do that, and most of us have learned not to fight that way. But that was such a scary verse when I learned that verse and like really study that. It was such a sweet verse. Like he bites for the humble, like that's so sweet, but he opposes the proud. And I just thought, I do not want to stand get directly in his path of opposition. That's scary to me, that he would oppose the proud. I can understand why he does that by all means, but it's a
Yeah.
it's a verse that I think about.
All right. So withdrawal is bad. Escalation is bad. Negative interpretation, right? So if somebody says something that would generally be interpreted as harmless, but for whatever reason you take it the wrong way, that is not healthy behavior, right? We got to unlearn that behavior. We got to figure that out.
Yeah. You might have some insecurities go in there. You might, normally that's kind of where some of that comes from, right? Or maybe you're thinking these things, and then you hear somebody say, you look good. You go, well, do I not look good every day? I mean, like, you see that on the TV shows or the movies or whatever, where the guy compliments his wife, and then all of a sudden it gets flipped, and the guy's like, oh, I was just trying to be sweet. Yeah. But that's kind of what that's talking about. Negative interpretation.
All right. And so the I in weenie is invalidation. So when one person denies that the other person has a right to feel the way they feel, right? That's kind of, we're talking about when we talk to our kids and somebody does something, they say, well, he did it because, I said, no, you can't assume somebody's motives, right? You can't assume why somebody did something, because all you can control is you. So this is a similar kind of thing. You don't want to project the way somebody is supposed to feel on them, right? Now, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but you don't get to control how they say they feel.
So I'm gonna kind of sum this up. When I talk to there's great friends, and they have a beautiful marriage, but when they were engaged, they had a really hard line, and it was almost like we call this thing off. And so she was tore up, he was tore up, and so she came to talk to me, and I said, "Listen, how about this? Cook a supper, be neutral. You don't need to, get to where you can talk about this without flipping the switch and going irate, right? You got to be rational here. Cook a supper, y'all eat together, and then talk about it and say, when you do this, it makes me feel this way. It's not so much the action, it's how it makes somebody feel." When Bob said that, I didn't really think that I sounded that way, but I had to sit back and go, what if I'm doing something, if I'm talking, I think I'm talking normal, and that makes him feel that I'm like being, snappy, or like unappreciative, or just not caring, not loving. I don't want to be that wife. So what am I going to do? Right. So it's when you do this, it makes me feel this way. And in conflict, I have found that that works really well, because so you have somebody and they leave their dishes everywhere, and you've told them day after day, like, I'm doing all I can to work this job, and I'm trying to keep our house clean, and you can't even throw your dish away, or put it in the sink to wash. And they're like, well, it's just not a big deal. I mean, I just don't think about it. But if I say, look, when you do that, it makes me feel like you don't care about our home, that you don't care that I'm doing all I can to try to make this a comfortable environment, that I want us to be. It's not perfection, right? But it's that I want to be a good steward of our home, because it's a gift from God. When you say things like that, it changes the posture of your hearts toward each other, because now you're linking hands to be thankful for this house, to take care of it. And it's not that big of a deal, but it's not worth having a big blow up. But if it happens time and time again, and that conflict is unresolved, it does fester. Do y'all agree with that? Small things fester. So it's better to fight it when it's a little lion cub, as we talked about, than to fight it when it's a full blown lion. So if you can do when you do this, it makes me feel this way, that's a lot better to fight it there than to just throw blows at each other. It generally won't resolve it. But when they understand the why, that changes the game. So that's just kind of some of those. That's how I would encourage. And they did, and they have like I said, beautiful marriage, lots of kids, and they're killing it. And God has blessed them richly. But it was a hard it was a hard path, but that dinner and the softening of the hearts, and I would say pray for the softening of your hearts toward each other. Like if you're going to go talk to somebody, pray for the softening of your heart for you and for that person that you're about to discuss with the conflict. And if they're a good friend and community, then I would pray that prayer before we even talked, and that changes your posture of how you come and talk to each other. Puts you on the same side as opposed to you can't throw a good punch here, but you can sure lay one on them when you're on opposite sides. So remember why we're coming together, right?
All right. So don't be a weenie. Withdrawal, escalation, negative interpretation, and invalidation. And so he says we're all guilty of at least one of these four patterns, and most of us have one or two that are like our go-to thing, right? If we get in some kind of conflict, so one or two of those are probably going to be your thing. So you need to identify it and you need to work on it. He says, understand when you're slipping into one of those patterns so you can quickly stop yourself and prevent the conflict from escalating. All right, so how to resolve conflict. Since conflict is inevitable and harmful, you need to know how to resolve it. So God addressed it in the Bible. It's amazing, right? Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, right? Community, that every charge may be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses. If he refuses to listen even then, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. And then the next example is Luke 6:42, and this is a first cousin to that first passage from Matthew that we talked about. How can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So several steps here, maybe just two. First, you need to acknowledge and ask forgiveness for your role in the conflict, right? You need to go to that person one-to-one and be humble and acknowledge. And JP talks about it on the in the book or on the podcast or something. Anyway, he says, I don't care if it is absolutely, objectively 99% the other person's fault. You own 100% of your 1%. And you go humbly to them and apologize and ask forgiveness and just own it. Right? That's the biggest step you can take. That's like what Amberly was saying. That puts you at least on a level playing field.
Yeah.
It gives you a shot.
Yeah. So like when, I had to step back and think about that with the phone thing. And I did, I thought, I love Bob. I want Bob to know that I love him, that was never my intention. And I don't want to do anything that would be of that. Right. So I'm going to own it. I'm going to say, I'm sorry. And I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to do to help. Because I really didn't know. So this is what I'm going to do to help, because I love you and I care about how you think I care about you and treat you. That is important to me. So the why behind your apology, even if you're 1%, and it can be hard to swallow 1%, but it's the why behind the 1%, because I love that person, because I want to be faithful to what I've learned. I want to obey God's command because I want to sleep with peace. I don't want to have broken relationships. I want to go and I want to live a life full of community. And that's going to mean that I'm going to have to eat some humble pie. And that's okay. We are imperfect. We're human beings, but it is hard because sometimes we just convince ourselves that we are perfect. But we're not. Okay, here we go.
So acknowledge and ask forgiveness for your role in the conflict. That's the first thing. And he says, is there anything you could have said or done differently to keep the conflict from escalating the way it did, right? Self-reflect in those moments too. And that's part of evaluating kind of the weenie thing, right? Where was I? Was I escalating? Was I, negatively interpreting what they said? Whatever it is, right? Be reflective, be self-reflective. I've been in the room where there's been some explosive conflict. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of the stuff that happens there, the seed of that is some narcissistic behavior. Whether that person is a narcissist or not, that's not for me to say necessarily, but the inability to self-reflect is dangerous, is really dangerous. I've seen that up close. And it's scary. So just be aware, be self-aware, not self-conscious, right? Not in such a negative, not in a negatively escalated way, but just have the abilities to self-reflect and own your part. Proverbs 19:11 says, good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. Which leads us into the second thing. He says, you need to determine whether it's a minor problem that can be overlooked. Some wrongs just aren't that big of a deal. Would y'all agree with that? Some things are just, who has seen a friend get into an absolute knockdown, drag out, whether it's a fist fight or like ended a relationship over nothing?
Anybody that when they told
Absolutely.
you, you were like, I'm sorry, what? You
Yeah.
did what? Oh,
So, JP says essentially the rule of thumb is if it's a small offense and you can overlook it, you should, right? If it's just something that's just totally irrelevant, if you were just in a bad mood and it hits you the wrong way, you need to just forget about it, most likely.
what was it that happened to us? And you were like, I'm already over. Oh, we were at Disney, okay, last week, and we were at Morimoto, the restaurant. Highly recommended by us.
So good.
Okay, so we were waiting, and they called us, and we had been waiting for a hot
man.
minute.
Wow.
We had a reservation prior to going. Blah blah blah. This group, this family, this dad was like, "Oh yeah, that's us," and they were like, "Bob," and he was like, "Oh well, I'm Rob, I'm Bob, whatever." And we were like, so the lady kind of checked, but it was a whole mixed bag of things that went wrong. But anyway, and she was like, we said, we're a party of six. Are you? And she was like, yeah, six. And we were like, you're six? And he was like, yeah. So he goes. And they were like, maybe you'll get your table soon. So we wait probably another 30 minutes at least. And Bob was like, they got our table.
Yeah. Okay.
They got our table. And so he was like,
And sweet little Amberly, she thinks so well of people. She's like, no, they wouldn't do that.
I was like, no,
Yeah,
I don't think so.
You don't think there are people in the world that do that?
I think that was Rob. And he just happened to have six. I was like, I'm 6'2". He happens to...
It's like, no, he took our table.
So they had four. And how do we know that? Because when Bob went back up to the desk, they were like, well, yeah, you've already been called. And we were like, and then I was, anyway. And so Bob was like, I'm already over it. I'm already over it.
Yeah,
so
my mom did not let go.
Mary was
so
she had to take
quickly.
more deep breaths.
I
But
was like, look,
we were
it's all
Disney
good.
tired.
I'm already past it.
So we go up. And who do you think they seat us by?
Rob.
Party of four, not six. And there they are. And they were like, but we were able to eat our food in peace because we had done the right thing and we did not lose it on that table, nor did we give them glaring eyes. We just let it be. But I was like,
Yeah.
anyway.
So. Oh, yeah. All that snow was like, it's Rob.
Yeah. You can imagine our kids were like, I mean, they were literally right here. We were like, we know. And they only had four. We were like, we see. But anyway, don't be that Rob. Don't be a Rob, okay? Don't be a weenie and don't be a Rob. But let it go. So Bob he had already that's already done. It's already done.
That's right. Be Bob, don't be Rob.
Be Bob, don't be Rob. That could go on a t-shirt. Let's keep going.
T-shirt. All right. So, and we've really pretty much talked about this, but that Matthew 18:15 through 17, first go to them one-on-one. If that doesn't work or they don't respond to that, then take a friend or two and go to them. Explain the situation to the friends first. Don't like take them into it cold and let them just watch you fight.
Yeah.
That's so fun. And then the last step would be bring in church leadership. And it says Hebrews 13:17 says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they're keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. And so, JP talks about this, not so much in this book, but some on his podcast and different things. Like, this is really, it's a heart posture for the other person. A lot of times, if they won't listen to church leadership, there's a reason that the Bible says then they're going to need to leave the church. Because if you won't listen to the shepherd that God has put over you in church leadership, then that's definitely a you issue, right? If they're totally impassionately looking at this situation, objectively looking at it, then they're generally a healthy person to listen to in that situation, if it gets to that point. Don't go straight to the preacher and crying about your friend who wronged you when you didn't even try to talk to them first, or didn't try to take a friend and talk to them.
I imagine that many of us have learned that lesson the hard way, not necessarily going to the preacher, but going to other friends and talking about this without first at least talking to the person that you had the disagreement with. There is wisdom in just doing it quickly, not letting the sun go down on your anger, but take a breath if you need a breath, right? Like, know yourself, but also talk to that person and try before you go and broadcast it, or become a keyboard warrior and have a great time doing that, because some of that damage can't be taken back, right? Like, it's hard. There's a trust thing that happens.
Yeah. And Romans 12:18 says, I forgot, I was so fancy, y'all. I added the slides with the scriptures onto this little thing. I forgot to put those on there. So Romans 12:18 says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all, right? So, and that's where we're back to when JP was saying, if it's something you can't overlook it, right? Because that is within your power to do. Then try to do that and live at peace with people. And he says at the end of the chapter, he says, I used to see conflict as an opportunity to display my anger, but now I see it as a different kind of opportunity. It's an opportunity to show who I belong to. Yeah, right. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Children take after their parents, and we're children of God. So we should be peacemakers as he is. And, we haven't talked about it in this way today, but God is the ultimate peacemaker, right? We ultimately wronged him. We severed our relationship with him by sinning. And what did he do? He sacrificed himself. He sacrificed his son to restore the relationship with us. So God is the ultimate peacemaker. So how can we not take a small step when somebody wrongs us, or whatever, we get into a disagreement or some type of conflict? So the way you handle conflict is perhaps your greatest opportunity to show the world you're a child of God. It should make you stand out. It should be different from how most people in the world handle conflict. It's different because we seek peace. That's it.
Yeah. And the Bible does say, I mean, like Bob said, there are some people that they don't want peace. They like strife. And so the Bible says, as much as it is possible, live at peace, right?
Yeah.
There are some that you can't live at peace with. And so,
And Jesus told the disciples, there are some towns you're going to go into, and they're not going to listen. They're not going to respond. They're going to attack you. Shake the dust off your feet as you leave, right? I mean, there are people, there are relationships, there are circumstances that is the right approach, but we need to try everything we can to bridge that gap and make peace first.
anybody have any questions? Okay, so real quick, we're going to break into small group, but before we do, I had asked Carrie Anna, bless her, she's here just for a week, and so she was like, oh, I'm here, and we were talking. I said, we just did community, and this is amazing. So Carrie Anna she graduated last year, and so she's been living out there, working, doing her thing, and
She's adulting.
She's adulting, guys. It's like,
Oh,
she's really
look at that.
adulting. And so we were talking Saturday, a little upwards game. We're talking, and she was like, "So I just found it, I said, well, do you have like a community that you're plugged into?" And she's like, "I've been kind of looking, and it's hard." And this is one of the reasons that we're doing this. And it's one of the reasons that I've kind of been reluctant to do this. We're not recording anymore, right? Yeah, we are. Okay. But it's one of those things. So